You're probably familiar with the expectation versus reality meme, and that's basically what building automation feels like for a lot of people these days. The expectation is you see some crazy 200 node n8n workflow on LinkedIn that's promoted as a one-click solution to all of your problems. You know, the ones where you have to comment automation to get the file, and you think, yes, this is going to save me so much time and money. But then the reality hits. You get the file, sometimes, you import the thing, and then you try to tweak a tiny detail to optimize it for your business. And then boom, the whole thing implodes. And the next thing you know, you're spending 3 hours trying to debug the workflow, trying to transform arrays into strings, and nothing works. So you give up. And it's super frustrating, right? You know exactly what you want to do, but you still pretty much need to be a software engineer to actually execute it. So you don't do it. And you go back to doing things manually, and you hate on the automation world. And that's where today's guest, Aaron from Gumloop, comes in. What I love about Gumloop is how fast and intuitive it is, even if you're not a developer. And today we're showing you, not just telling, because Aaron is going to do a live build of a powerful research assistant, a workflow that took me ages to build on n8n in just a fraction of the time. And the secret is that Gumloop is an AI native automation tool, unlike Zapier or Make. So for example, their new MCP Nodes make things much easier and smoother. They let you build custom API calls just by describing what you want, which gets rid of all the usual automation headaches like parsing, deduplicating, etc. And the best part for everyone is that Gumloop has a genuinely useful free forever plan. So you can follow along, build the exact same workflow that we build in a podcast, and run it for free if you want to. If you've been excited about the idea of automating a lot of your business, but you've struggled implementing it due to technical liabilities or time limitation, this episode is for you. Let's get started. All right, so today we have Aaron from Gumloop. So Aaron, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to have you guys because I think you guys are doing some really cool and interesting stuff, especially your take on MCPs. And our audience is interested in essentially building, workflows that is going to help them and leverage AI so that they can have an unfair advantage, against their competition or just save some money. I use n8n, and n8n is cheap, but it's a pain in the ass to use. I think you guys are well priced and much easier to use. And I think a lot of people would probably prefer using n8n. And so I wanted to showcase all the cool stuff that you guys are doing, but in your own words, how is Gumloop different from the tools that most people use, which is essentially Zapier, Make, and n8n?
Yeah, I'm a longtime automator. I've been close to those tools for a while, big Zapier user. I've not been a big n8n user. I think Gumloop is different in a few assumptions. The first assumption is that AI is kind of native and that your workflows are just going to use AI. And the second is that as AI is more prevalent, you need to provide it with information. What I mean by that is you should be able to go to Salesforce and be like, give me all of my deals. And that's like a list if we're talking to more technical folks. And you should be able to deal with lists in easy ways. Loop through, collapse. And then as your flows get more complex, they should still be usable. So Gumloop takes all of those assumptions and builds a fun platform to build your automations in.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. It's fun, actually.
Yeah, it's really fun. You're building and you're like,
I enjoy it too.
This needs to loop. I need to build a subflow so that as we build, and I'll show you, you'll kind of see what those mean. So, and we're kind of trying to give everyone the ability to automate their workflows, technical and non-technical folks. And that takes a wide variety of ways, making things intuitive, using AI in our platform as well. And yeah, it's just really fun to build again. It's really a fun time.
I agree. And one thing that people are going to ask before we jump into the live build, how much does it cost? How does the pricing work? Because people want to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jump in.
So we have a free plan. You can play around with Gumloop. We'll give you a set of credits. What's important to know in Gumloop is that unless we are charged, like we're using an external model or an external provider, running flows is free. So I think we have a 1 credit charge. I think you get 500 on the free plan. So you can play around with Gumloop.
You get 1,000 actually.
Oh, even better. There you go. And we'll give
and you can top up 2,000 more credits for $10 from what I saw.
Exactly.
Right?
So if you're trying to reading information, putting information, sending Slack, that's all free nodes. Starter is $97 a month, and that gives you 30,000 credits. So you can start playing around, that's 30,000 for 1 mini calls from Gumloop. And depending on the complexity of the model, it'll cost a little more, a little less. And we only charge when we're charged, right? So you're going out to provider using AI. And then 300 gets you more credits, gives you more of that team functionality. And then enterprise is we have an organization and we want security and user-owned models and things like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What I suggest is we jump in and we start building and showing the platform, right?
Absolutely. Okay. This is the flow we're going to rebuild together. So this is a flow that identifies all external meeting attendees the next 24 hours, does research about those folks, and writes me a one-page report about those folks. So I would run this every single morning. It would look at my calendar, identify everyone I'm talking to that's not part of my organization, and kind of give me a summary of those folks. But where I think Gumloop is really cool is when I say do research, it's going to go, use this concept of self-flow, which as we rebuild, I'll walk you through it, right? So it's doing a perplexity search of recent news about the company. It's enriching that contact with Apollo. And then it's even going to HubSpot to identify tickets that are part of that
internal data.
Exactly. And you kind of start imagining, like, as an organization, how you use all these building blocks. So you think of, you have a 50, 60 salesperson team. Well, could you enable this for every single salesperson such that every morning, every one of those folks has their report that goes into all the internal systems that they want to talk to this person? So you think of tickets, you think of recent news, what has happened in this account. You can use Gumloop to kind of centralize all that.
And you could use it something else, right? Some people use Notion, some people use something else, like any other system you could plug it in and essentially get your internal data.
Yeah. And as we
people.
start building this, you'll experience that kind of the way we think about MCP, which I think is very different from a lot of either other platforms or how people have talked about MCP generally.
Can you just explain to people what MCP is for the people who might be tuning in and don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So MCP is just a way to call APIs. If you're not familiar with APIs, it's a way of writing words to query data from systems. So a good example, these two are actually MCP nodes, which we'll talk about in a minute. And this one is like get tickets for contact. Before, you needed to either us as a platform support tickets, and that was very rigid, or you had to like understand APIs. Now you can just in Gumloop get tickets for contact.
As an n8n user, I can tell you need to learn basically the API of these things on other platforms.
Yeah,
so.
And we're both quote unquote somewhat technical. I don't know how to do it. Let's rebuild it together. And if you have questions throughout,
let's go.
Let me know. So one big difference right off the bat, we're going to start with an input node. How Gumloop thinks of flows is in functions if you're a developer. So if I look at the do research, I take an email as input and I output kind of the research. And then I could reuse this little thing in other places. So I always like to use the example on social media. People love to share super complex flows with like 400 steps,
And then comment automation, and then I'll send you the file, etc.
So
what know these ones.
For me, what a good flow looks like, it looks like this. It has an input. It
simple.
calls multiple functions that are each independent. In this case, we only have one, but we can even split these out. So instead of talking, let's kind of build. So I'm going to use an input node. I'm just going to use myself. Right. And let's call this.
So that would be like the person that is the attendee's email.
Exactly.
So that's the person that has a meeting with you.
Exactly. And then what do I want? So the first thing I want to do is I want to go to Perplexity, right? And I want to do maybe like, okay, just give me recent news about Gumloop. Very easy. So I just added the Perplexity node. Now, how Gumloop works is you connect a node, and then that makes the data available to pass into parameters. So I just put aaron@gumloop.com into a search query. So now I'm going to say, get recent information about. Now, this is a little weird, right? Because now I'm passing aaron@gumloop.com. That's probably not what I want. I want just gumloop.com, right? Now,
so how do you fix that?
Good question. Yeah. So two ways. I can probably in the prompt, ignore and just, but let's use an AI step. Now, I'm sure you're old school like me and you would be like, why not use regex? I don't want to is the answer.
No, I use AI now. I'm lazy.
Yeah, we're all lazy now. So
like Gemini 2.0 Flash is cheap enough that you can just call that.
Exactly. So what we're going to do, actually, let me do an even better. So there are multiple ways of using AI in Gumloop, right? So using AI, you can ask AI, which is that prompt style. Right. So that's like ChatGPT.
And you can extract data.
So extract data. That is saying, get me the domain from the email. Categorizers, tell me if this is positive or negative. Generate image is, ChatGPT image generation. And let's just do an extract data.
And these are just like pre-prompted AI calls, basically, right? It's like there's a prompt behind the scene that calls the model.
Yes, but I will say this, it's a little more complex than that because we want consistency. So it's not just a system prompt. There's also us kind of working to make sure that the output is always consistent.
It's a JSON output.
Yes. So you could actually recreate this with an Ask AI node, but it's just like, if we want to get technical,
it's complicated.
It's not that complicated. In the Ask AI, you actually have a function that forces a structure for the output.
Okay. I'm just asking how this works.
Oh, no, you're totally right. So I'm passing in the content to extract is the email, and then you specify what you want to extract. And I want to extract domain. And then you mentioned like the cost of Gumloop. So you can choose which model you want to run.
Okay.
And depending on the cost to us of running that model, so something like 4.1 nano is 1 credit.
It's probably fine.
So you can run 500 of these on the free plan.
And when you have a paid account, you can put your API key as well, right?
Correct.
So it's like you can run an expensive model through your API key.
Exactly. For folks who don't have those types of relationships and want to experiment across all models, you can do that.
Yeah.
So you don't need to have that limiting factor. So I think actually without any additional context, but I always like to provide it, you are going to be given an email as input, and your goal is to extract the domain. And then for the specific domain, I'm going to say extract the domain from the email and then give e.g. aaron@gumloop.com, return gumloop.com. Great. So now let's connect it to Perplexity. And now we have the domain, right? So we can do that. Now we can run the whole flow.
I was going to say, do you test?
I always test. I'm a tester. Do you not test?
No, I was going to ask, like usually when I put one node, I would test the output of that node or something.
Yeah.
Is that how you test your flow?
Yeah. Always.
Okay.
Oh, so it depends, right? Okay. So we just ran the flow and we can see on the right everything that happened. So I have my input, my extract data that returned gumloop.com. And then I have my kind of response about what is Gumloop.
Okay.
And then so
this was the Perplexity search.
Exactly. And so now we can kind of think, okay, what else do I want this node to do, right? So we're going to call it a subflow in a moment, but what else do I want? So when I think of workflows, I want it to do, maybe it wants to do an enrichment. We want to know who this person is. So let's go to Apollo. I already built this node with MCP, but I'll show you an MCP node once we get to the Google Calendar one.
Okay, I'm excited to see that actually.
Yeah. So what this does is that it takes as input an email. This is a node that I built myself. So I'm going to pass in the email. And then, I want to include current position. So it has 2 outputs.
And one thing I like is you guys have the integration with Apollo, right? I don't have to have a subscription with them.
That's correct. Yes.
It's nice because it's a pretty expensive subscription. For some people who just want to use it for a few meetings or something, it kind of makes sense to use it that way.
That's the case today for all our native enrichment. So if you just use kind of core nodes and then go to contact enrichment. So this, you're not passing in enrich contact. And we're working on making MCP nodes, which I'll show you in a moment, also for specific providers. If you don't have an API key, you'll use our agreement because not everyone has a relationship with Proxy Curl, ZoomInfo, Apollo. So we want to give folks the ability to do what they want. Okay, so that's going to grab that. And then what else do we want? Oh, we want HubSpot. So we would want HubSpot tickets. I'm going to do get.
Can we do Notion instead? Or do you just have HubSpot?
I don't have a Notion set up with tickets for that, but it'll work the same way. Yeah. Okay. So this is another MCP node that I built that takes as input an email, right? And returns, let's return maximum 10. And it's going to return as text all tickets. Let me get an example of someone I know has tickets. So I used as an example, Reed Hastings. Okay. And let's run this whole flow. There we go.
So what happens now? Now it's like all 3 are happening at the same time in parallel, right?
Yeah, so we actually resolve the graph. And if you have a loop, a subflow, it'll do it in parallel. But otherwise, it'll execute every single kind of node on the canvas. So it's like, okay, I need to execute these 2, so I need to execute this one first. I can execute this one and this one. We have auto formatting coming today. So when folks see this podcast, they'll be able to get auto formatting. Okay, let's kind of look at the inputs. So I have my tickets that come from HubSpot. Then I have my, person details from work experience, right? Then
so you have the Apollo stuff, you have the internal data,
and then Perplexity.
And I guess you have Perplexity.
So now I can bring all of these together. You can output each one of these individually, but because I want to kind of format this to a research, right? Think of this is what we're going to loop on in a moment. So now I can do a combined text node just to make it simple that grabs all of this data together. So I'm going to pass in Perplexity. I'm going to say recent company information.
So it's just going to make a big chunk of text with all 3 in a row.
And then what essentially we're going to do is we're going to do this for each external attendee. So there we go. Oops.
Yeah, that's where the power comes in when you do it for like 100 people, right?
Exactly. And automatically. Right? This is kind of using formatting in like node way. When we do the MCP, we'll actually show you how you can format directly when you're creating the node. I know I'm talking a lot about MCP. I'm super like one of the things I'm most excited about at Gumloop.
I see that.
Let me go contact.
You're teasing it.
I want people to watch the whole thing. Because I think it's easy to just be like, oh, let me just do whatever. But it's important to understand how to build first to then really kind of become a power user. So let me look at what the outputs look like. Raw person data is probably what I want, right? And then what else do we have? We have recent tickets.
So now what you're doing is you're basically just formatting the data that comes in into a node that puts it nicely and essentially says what is what.
Exactly.
So that potentially you pass it to an AI node later that will
Exactly.
write the email,
That is
understand what is what.
100%. So now if I go to out, I'm just going to pass this as the output. So what does this flow do? If we collapse all of these, this subflow basically kind of does internal enrichment. That's how I like to think about it. Right. So now anyone could like run this thing that I built, and we're going to run it in a moment to create our external report. But there's no reason why you wouldn't say like, hey, I'm meeting this person, or hey, I have a new contact in an email list. Let me figure out what we know about this person. And then you could run this subflow, this flow. So let's call this do research.
Or you get an email intro or something like that.
Exactly.
Like it's like all kind of use cases. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is like what it's really important, these little building blocks. And it's what I love to show. It's because then you're like, once you've built it once, anyone in your business can reuse these building blocks. And we're going to reuse it for our use case for external attendees.
Okay.
Right. So I've built this flow. What does this flow do? It takes as input any email, gets us information about the company, tells us what Apollo knows, and gets any tickets in HubSpot associated to that user, right? And then formats that and outputs it. Okay, let me call this output attendee info. Let's save that.
So we can call this like an internal deep research for people.
That's actually
like
much better.
The way people use ChatGPT deep research, you would say that's something similar for actual people.
Yeah, and
so that you can be smart when you talk to them and know what they like and what makes them tick, etc.
Exactly. And when I think of how to think of automations like this, it's like, what do you do before XYZ? Even if you're an MCP user, you're going to be like, can I get information about read from HubSpot? It's going to be like, what do you want? And you're like, I want tickets. And you're like, okay, great. And then you're like, okay, but now I want to take this and I want to take that and I want to do this and I want to do that. If you're someone who's systems oriented, you're like, okay, I always do the same thing. Can I just kind of put it into a step-by-step workflow? And that's really where I think Gumloop shines. That's why I don't use the word AI agents. I have a very particular output that I want to work towards because I always do the same thing. Let's now get external attendees and write reports. So let's go write report. Let's just do that. Okay, so what do we want to do?
So I think you need to point out at what's happening at the bottom of the screen, right?
Yes.
You have these different tabs. It works a little bit like a Google spreadsheet. Essentially, there's different tabs, and each of them is a part of the automation that I can connect to, right?
Yes. And so this is one of the moments where you start seeing the power of subflows. I remember when I first, if I couldn't do it aside, I remember when I first did Gumloop, I'm like, this is dumb. Why would I not want to see my whole flow? Right? What's the point? So as your flows get more complex, what you want to do is, if you're developing, it's like functions. So
you want to make it modular.
So now we can say, if I can go to my Google Calendar, find all external attendees, I can just connect it to this, right? Put the email here and give me the output. And so what we see at,
trigger deep research.
At larger organizations, someone's like, oh, well, I built this thing that's really useful for me. But then someone else can be like, well, that's also useful to me. And they build these like primitives that are unique to the company. In this case, could be like, oh, internal deep research. But then it could be, hey, I figured out a way to identify fraud. And then someone's like, okay, great. Like I can reuse that piece in my bigger flow, right? So I run a report.
And you can call it from somewhere else.
Exactly.
And then you use it.
Okay, so let's get into the meat of it, right? So how would you do Google Calendar, right? So Google Calendar, you see these are our native nodes, right? So not these ones. These are the MCP nodes, which we'll build together. You would do, okay, I need to read all of my events for today. And then I have to get the attendees filter. And then I have to loop over the filter. And then you're like, oh, but what if I have no attendees?
It sucks.
It really sucks. So how we think about MCPs is two things. One is, can we use MCPs to broaden what we can do with an integration? So have deeper integrations. And second, can we do multiple things at once? So you don't have to necessarily understand this whole filtering thing. So let's bring it on. So I'm bringing on a Google Calendar MCP nodes. Honestly, we hesitated a lot to call them MCP nodes because you don't need to understand anything about MCPs to run this thing. Right? It's not about...
And also MCP feels like an agent thing, right? Like this is almost not using an AI agent.
Yes.
It's just like you're basically leveraging a tech made for AI agents as a way to make essentially more complex API calls in natural language, right?
So yes, and very simple API calls, right? It's very important. This is what I really get excited about this because this is everything we support. So these are the tools, right? So these are the MCP tools. Now, in the case of Google Calendar, you're like, could you build native nodes for all of this? Yeah, probably, right? But if I show you Slack,
right? I've been built Slack box.
Right? Slack.
How this works.
Upload file, react to message, pin message, get user preference, remove
Yeah.
from list, pin. These are things I didn't even know you could do in Slack.
And you don't even have everything, actually. If you build an app on Slack, there's like way more
Exactly.
authorizations
So-
for everything.
There's a world in which people come to us and like, I want to do XYZ. And we were like, well, yeah, sure, we could enable that, but it's going to take time. It's in our backlog. And not only that, but the way we tell you to do things is like specific to the way we think you're going to use Gumloop. With MCP, we don't have that problem anymore. The drawback
All right.
is that you have to help us configure.
How does it work?
Yeah, so let's prompt it. I already created this before, but
Emails
return
from
all
attendees.
emails of external attendees for meetings in the next 24 hours. Think again.
Okay.
How would you do this otherwise? You would have to read a list of events, filter on datetime. Filtering on datetime is a disaster.
Next 24 hours is also challenging because you're talking like it's actually not a day, it's 24 hours.
Exactly.
So you probably need to scrape
Exactly.
a little bit
Yeah,
more.
there's a
and then
whole
you
thing.
need to filter out. Yeah.
So-
like if you really want to be too spec, yeah, it's more challenging.
Let's generate it. So the first thing Gummy's going to do here, Gummy's our little building bot, it's going to think of what it thinks the inputs and outputs of your node are. So it's going to confirm whether it understands what you want to do. Okay, here we go. So it's saying, which calendar do I want to use? Which time range? Do I include meeting details? Max results. And then it says a list of external meeting emails and meeting details. That seems good to me.
Okay. So it's going to return all of this, basically. It's going to do query returning all of this.
So this is where, like, for folks who are curious of how we thought about this, when you work with MCP and Claude, like Claude is rethinking your query every time you do it. So what that means is you're saying, get my meetings for the next 24 hours. And it's going to be like, okay, I'm doing it slightly differently than I did last time. And you're hoping that it works. In our case, we want you to do it once, get to an output that you like, and then run that node every time the exact same way because we want a consistent output. So what I'm going to click on is generate code. So now we're writing code that is static that will call the MCP tools.
Do the same thing every time.
So that code is static. So what that means is if you get to an output for this node that you like, when you save it, it's going to run the same way all the time.
And also, it's less wasteful because when I use MCP in Claude or in Typing Mind or something like this, quite often what really happens is they call the MCP with the wrong parameters. They're like, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted.
Exactly.
Calls it again and again and again. And then you spend a lot of credit on everything if you're doing API. It's just slow as well. So yeah, I guess this, if you get it right once, then it works every time.
Exactly. So let's run the test. Let's see. I have, I think, 2 meetings I should. So what it's done in the background, just to show you, is it's written the code, right? So this, we abstract it, right?
It vibe coded an extension.
Exactly.
Let's just say that.
Yeah, exactly. It vibe coded like the MCP, right? And then we have our external meeting attendees. So what's interesting here is that it includes...
Does it work?
Yeah, it works. So I have Brian Chesky, I have Netflix.
Okay.
What I can do, I can request changes because it has me. So I can say filter out all emails that include gumloop.com.
I see. So now this is almost like a cursor-like experience where you look at the result, you don't like what you see, you're like, oh, change this, change that, and then it kind of like rework the code, I guess, right?
Exactly. So now it's regenerating this code based on what I just said.
Okay.
There we go. It's regenerating. And
It's going to add a new filter.
exactly. Hopefully, there we go. Aaron demo.
Yeah.
Let's run the test. And what we're hoping for is this output. There we go. Boom.
This episode is sponsored by SEOwriting.ai. If you're spending hours researching and crafting long-form content that actually ranks, then their Super Pages feature is about to change your workflow completely. Here's what makes it brilliant. You give it a single keyword like best e-commerce platforms, and it automatically researches what's currently ranking on Google for that topic. Then it creates a better SEO optimized version designed to outrank the competition. What really impressed me was their brand voice feature. I used their web scrape tool to analyze one of my existing blog posts, and it nailed my tone, style, and target audience perfectly. The AI understood exactly how I write. I generated 2 test articles. The first, from just a single keyword, produced solid, well-structured content with a score of 52, plus additional keyword suggestions to improve the rankings there. The second article, where I provided slightly more detailed brief, including how I wanted a very short intro, came out significantly better though. So the lesson is, give it a proper brief, not just the keyword, and you'll get better results. Now, once it generates your content, you can select any text and give the AI custom instructions to edit that section. Once you're happy with the content, you can publish it directly to your WordPress site with one click. The AI generated images are helpful placeholders, but you'll probably want to replace them with actual screenshots or photos. This is a common issue with most AI tools right now, but it will only get better over time. but the content it produced was 90% publish ready from the get-go. Over 50,000 content creators are already using their tool, so check out SEOwriting.ai and try their basic tool absolutely free, or it's just $19 a month for up to 50 articles and 10 super pages. And you can also use the code HACKPODCAST for 25% off that. So thanks again to SEOwriting.ai for sponsoring this episode.
Does it work every time? Does it fail sometimes?
Yes. And so a few things here. This is the trade-off, right? So we can now pretty much do something that used to take 4 to 6 nodes and like I loop and blah, blah, blah. Now it'll work. And it works extremely well. Now, there's a learning to like how to prompt, which we help with a system. So when we launched this, a lot of people were writing like the whole flow that they want. So we now have a prompt in place that checks whether you're only calling the tools that are available. So that's the first thing that we do. And then we also are going to improve this. Like I always say, it works extremely well if you're a little patient at the beginning, because once you get it once, it's there now. External meeting attendees, right?
If I build this in n8n, it would probably be like a 4 to 6 nodes, multi-API call thing where I need to do a curl function. It would be complicated.
Yeah, in Gumloop too.
And it would take me more time than it took here.
Exactly. And so now we have this thing that just kind of works, right? So if I include meeting details, let's see what it looks like. Oops, I need to select. Let's run it. And there's a little bit of variability, right? There we go. So now external meeting attendees, and then I have a JSON of the summary of the meeting, right? So but now we have our two, like if you had 100 external attendees, it would get the next 100, which is awesome. So now what do we want to do?
Now you can research them all, right?
Exactly. So what do I want to do? I want to take the email. I want Brian Chesky and read. I wanted to go here, replace the email, run this thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a subflow. So subflows are basically calling an existing flow in your workbook or in your workspace. So I have do research live. That's the one we built. So I bring it in. What do I see? I see input attendee email. So I can just bam, and then bam. You'll notice something here as I do it. I'm putting a list into a text input. It's going to loop. It's essentially saying I'm going to...
What is loop mode?
So loop mode is essentially saying, okay, if you put a list into a text input, Gumloop is going to loop that node or over every item in the list. In English, what that means is that here, it's going to say, okay, you want me to run do research live for Brian, and then you want me to run do research live for Reed. So it goes into loop mode. So it's going to do this for every item in this. Exactly. And if you had 10, it would do it 10 times.
That's why it scales, right? When you have large lists of people, let's say you have a list of 100 leads, for example, you can immediately get like 100 deep research done on these things. That's where it replaces manual work to a point where you could never do that.
Exactly.
Without automation.
Yeah, like we would parse through maybe 100 tweets an hour at Webflow. So now it's running the deep research. What is going to be the output? It's going to be the attendee info, right? So this right here, which is our kind of smushed, our combined text. Let's run it.
Yeah. So it's not really a report at this point. It's just like a bunch of information.
Exactly. So now it's getting external emails, and now it's running in parallel that do research live, right? Now we can keep it.
Oh, that's nice that it runs in parallel.
Yes.
A lot of tools would do it one after the other. It would take forever, you know?
Exactly.
So this is nice.
So we parallelize to an extent, like we'll chunk it, obviously. There we go. So I can see the output. I have all the information. I have a few tickets. I don't have any tickets with Brian, but I do have a few tickets with Reed Hastings. Okay, so how do we actually get this into AI? So now naturally you would say like, okay, well, let's add an Ask AI node, right?
Okay, yeah, why not?
Yeah, but this is where we're going to spend a little bit of a teaching moment, right? So what you would do normally, you would go do this and you would do this, but it would go into loop mode.
It doesn't work, right?
It will work, but it'll give you 2 reports. Right? What I want is I want one report with everybody. So I don't want loop mode, but then it's saying, oh, you're giving me a list into a text input. So for folks watching this who are like, oh, we have a lot of content on this. We have a cohort where people can come learn. But what you need to remember, if you want to turn a list into text, you have to smush. Okay? Smushing is using join list items. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the output, we're going to smush it and separate by new line. That's essentially saying, take that list and turn it into text. And that's really, really useful.
Make it a string.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a technical word for that. All I know is smush. Now, I can pass it in and I have join text. This is just basically all the research that I've done. Now, this is where I think is really cool. I had already written a prompt, so I'm just going to copy paste it.
Okay.
So I don't write my own prompts like many of you. I have AI write the prompt for me. So I went into Gummy and I said, hey, write me a prompt that takes as input attendee information and give me all the information. So I have it right here.
Does it fill the node? Like, does the Gummy chat actually is able to go and interact with my nodes and fill it there
Yes.
where I need it?
So Gummy both understands your flow and you can add nodes to the flow. And we're working on, I can give you a sneak peek. We're working on having Gummy build whole flows for you. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, that's pretty
including MCP nodes as well. So it'll be able to build those.
So that's the true vibe coding for automation you're building, basically.
Yes.
Like that, you're building the cursor of automation.
That's what we're hoping.
Automation.
100%. And I have to say, it's so fun. It's so fun to build these. There was so much pain of like, oh, you don't support this thing, right? Now I have to APIs and it's just been so fun.
Actually, yeah, that's a good question. What do I do if you don't support the tool I want to use? Let's say I'm using some obscure CRM that you don't
Great question. So one, let us know. We're working on a ton of integrations and it's so much faster to integrate these MCP integrations than it is like full-blown native integrations. Now, a quick note, you can also use a custom node. So a custom node is just running code.
Okay.
But even here, you would configure your inputs, your outputs, kind of like an MCP setup, but you would just write the code yourself. But you can also vibe code it. You can say, I want an retrieve emails from MailChimp, and you can chat with it.
Okay. So it allows you to make an HTTP request, basically. It's a bit like make.com or something like this, where you would just make an HTTP request.
Exactly. But it can do much more than that. So you can also use it for complex filtering or for routing or for things like that.
Yeah, it's code, basically.
It's code, whatever you want. So that's like the escape valve. And we're going to be improving this in the next release where this lives here. So you'll be able to just kind of write what you want and it'll generate the code. And then you can switch between, similar to what we did with...
That's really cool.
Exactly. So we want to have those escape valves. So whether an MCP or native, you can build your workflows. Okay, let's get to this. So I have this big prompt.
Let's go back to the AI.
Yeah, so I actually did provide meeting title information in that one. One thing I learned, I don't know if this is new to everybody else, you can just give the AI HTML that AI wrote to format your email and the emails look great. This one is not super great, but you can keep iterating on it. And the AI is really good at generating code. So it can just output HTML and make a really good email. So here we have research about external attendees. I'm going to put in the prompt, my little join text, also meeting details. So I had that initially. If we go back to my prompt here, I have include meeting details. Let me see what it outputs. Okay, so it gives me that summary. So that's also a list. So let's quickly join list items. We need to smush.
Okay.
Let's smush this. Let's call this meeting details. When I'm building in Gumloop, I feel like I can do anything, Okay, so meeting details is here now, right? So what are we doing?
Okay.
We're grabbing meeting details. It's a list. If we have 10 meetings, the list of 10, we're smushing that. We're getting our research about the folks, and then we're having AI run. So what I can also do is then send it like a report. So I'm just
your email.
Exactly. So
basically you wake up in the morning, you have your little email report, you know everyone you're going to meet, and you can tell what their favorite color is when you get on the meeting.
I'm sending it. So you just kind of plug in aaron@gumloop.com. I'm going to say your daily report for today's meetings. I don't want to save as draft. And here I can send as HTML. Right? So a little pro tip for folks.
So that because it puts HTML.
Yeah. So I can also resume. Actually, I added some nodes, so I need to run the whole thing. Let's run the whole flow and we can kind of talk about what it's doing step by step.
Okay.
So external meeting, doing research about each one of those folks, smushing, then having AI write an email, and then send me that email. So there we go. It just did the research.
You know what I really like? I really like the fact that you see the automation run on the right and the input-output to debug, to know where it broke and what broke. If you click on see input-outputs, you see everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the people who don't build automations, they're probably like, whatever. But the people who actually have spent hundreds of hours on these tools, they know it's very nice.
Yeah.
Because on many tools, you need to load a separate page or something. There's another page load, etc. And just pain in the ass to test your nodes and then see what actually works.
Okay. So let me go back here. This is actually a really good learning moment. Let me bring in the email if I can. Yeah. So not a great report, right? Doesn't look great. So
yeah, it's a little bit. You like white spacing.
Yeah, it's not a great, but let's do this. Let's go back. Let's kind of improve it. So I think what would make this better is maybe a little more complex model. right? So
Okay.
let's see
Yeah,
what,
I agree. 4.1 mini is a bit
yeah.
basic.
So now instead,
Oh, 3. Okay. You like your high API bills, huh?
yeah, well, listen, I don't pay for credits, so I don't, I like my, let me get,
I'd run probably 2.5 Pro or something like this. That would
yeah,
probably
we can
do the
definitely,
trick.
so one thing,
It's fine. Don't worry. Just let it run. It's
one
okay.
thing that's interesting
But-
about 2.0 is that they're not giving a lot of inference. It's slow. So they're going to put you in a queue.
Ah.
And I don't want to make you wait, Gael.
I see. Fair enough.
Let me see. Where do we got? Okay, here we go.
It's coming.
Oh, good. I like it. These things take time sometimes. Perfection takes time.
It's reasoning.
Yeah, go.
It's the reasoning models.
Okay.
All right.
Let me see what this looks like. How's this? Okay, so here you go. Spot
Okay, that's
tickets.
nicer.
Much nicer, right?
I agree. I can see CEOs would love that. Actually, like if you build that for the CEO of the company, they kind of like they fire their personal assistant and they love you after that.
No, I think it gives the personal assistant time to do more important things.
True.
Now, just like that, we can put this on a schedule. So just add a time schedule, time trigger. So every day at 8 a.m.
I love that you have natural language on that too. So much more intuitive than many tools.
Yeah, create time trigger.
This is what I like. These little things that make the tool a little bit easy to use. It's like, some tools they just put like seconds, but they won't tell you it's seconds. So you kind of have like, like 18,264. And you're like, what is this?
Yeah, like
and
you gotta figure out. You gotta be
So
like, well, how
this
many
is nice,
seconds?
actually.
Yeah. So this is
well, it's just ChatGPT, but it just takes time, right?
Gumloop just assumes that AI is part of everything you do, and the platform reflects that. So either in the different ways you can use AI and how AI helps you build workflows and nodes now with MCP nodes. So really, we just assume that you don't have to use AI in your workflow, but maybe you want AI to help you build your workflow, right? And when you are using AI, we want you to be able to use it in the most convenient way, not just prompting, extracting information, categorizing, web AI research, generate images, so many different ways you can use it.
One thing I really liked as well about the platform is the fact that you can make these interfaces, like you can basically build forms for people to trigger these loops.
Yes.
Which is very nice because in your company, there's some people, it doesn't matter how nice it looks, they don't want to use it, right? So there's people who build stuff for them and then they just want the form and they just want to use the stuff that you've used. And so you guys have the forms and you guys have the Chrome extension, right?
Yes, exactly. So just quickly, you can build an interface right here. We can imagine, I'm excited again, coming back to this idea of like building blocks. Now that we have research, right? We can build an interface, right? That just calls, right? That, so let me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's say it's not in your calendar, but you want to research someone and you don't have to rebuild everything.
Email, and then we can do 2 email inputs. So attendee email, and then we can have your email.
Yeah.
And then I can call, I'm going to just sketch it out really quickly. Bam. Bam, your attendee email. So that's going to give me, right? And then I just do another AI call, just like I did before, right? That formats this into a beautiful report. So beautiful report, here's the data, and then sends
To me.
to the person who submitted, right? So now, bam, like that, your email, recipient, and then attendee, like the response from the API call, from the AI call. It's really unfortunate that those just have 1 letter difference. Your report, right? Bam. And so now you've just rebuilt, now anyone can go to this link. Let me save it.
Yeah.
Anyone in your company can go to the link and be like, oh, I want information about Reed Hastings.
For the people who will never log on to Gumloop, this is really nice. Like it's a nice way that you don't have to build again another flow in another app that will capture the data, like a Google form that connects or a Notion or whatever.
Yep.
That just makes it fast and easy. So this I really like actually, because the truth is it doesn't matter how nice you make the tool, there will be people who will not use it.
So I didn't style it, but this is now accessible to your company. You really nailed it on the head. Like not everyone looks at a flow like this. I mean, obviously the people listening to this might be the type of person who does, but like this is super intimidating.
But they build for the people who don't.
And you want somewhere to go where you can just be like, oh, I just want my report. I just want my thing. In coming back, I know I'm harping on this a lot, this building block, not only can we now extend this functionality with public, sharing within the company, but it's repurposing this little piece, this little building block. We've now repurposed it twice.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, the power, this ability as a business to be like, here are the different building blocks you can really create. So for people who are kind of automation consultants or systems builders, you can come in and be like, okay, everybody wants to get deal information from Salesforce. Let me build a piece of that. And now this person wants a different route. They want it in different ways. And so really that's why we have so much success with orgs, is that they have these types of challenges.
Yep. And then you just build these little functions that you call, etc. And also I think if you're a consultant, like the interface is really nice because like if people want like a quick MVP of something, you can just release it really fast.
Yep.
Again, with a minimal external system connections or whatever. And then you just give them a URL and you're like, do you like this? And then you might refine it.
Yep.
If they like it, like for feedback, etc. It's kind of nice to use it.
And we're seeing also people build like landing pages that use Gumloop flows as a backend. That's also possible.
Yeah.
Right. Those types of stuff. So really I always say this, now it's up to everybody to build cool stuff, and I can't wait to see what everybody builds.
I wanted to ask you actually, because there's only 4 people working at Gumloop, right? How many people work from what I see on the website? Is it up to date?
Probably a few more. We're a very small team. So I think in terms of here in San Francisco, we are 8. I think we're still under 10 employees.
I wanted to ask, what do you use? Like, what are the tools? What did you build internally to be an efficient 8 people team? Because I think like it's cool to see this tool and it's cool to see this workflow, but people never know what to build. Yeah. They always ask me like, what do I do with this? They say, hey, it's cool, but I don't know what to do with it. Like you guys are doing it. You're building a successful company with literally 8 people. What do you automate?
Wow, so much. Okay, let me just give you an example, right? So because I want to see. So people work in GitHub. They merge things to GitHub. I don't live in GitHub. Yep. Can I get every commit since the last merge? Have AI write me a blurb so I can send an email.
What is it?
Simple, right? I want that at every single merge. Then what else do we do? I write a new lesson. I then parse through all existing documentation, blog posts, sitemap basically, and say, where should I link this? And I do that with Gumloop.
Internal linking.
All our enrichment internally.
What tools do you use for that? How do you actually get the pages that you should add the link on?
Gumloop. So here, I can just like sketch out the flow. I do a get call to our sitemap, which gives me my whole sitemap.
Yeah.
I use extract data to get all the URLs. That gives me a list of URLs. Then I have a subflow.
You scrape them?
I scrape them, exactly. I have a subflow that says current page, scrape all these pages, have AI Gemini 2.5 probably, because there's a very big context window that says, here's a new page, here's all existing pages, return me a report of cross-linking opportunities and tell me why you think it's a good opportunity.
Cool.
Easy, something I would have never been able to do. Is it perfect? No, but it gives me like really good opportunities and then I can just update.
Okay.
All our enrichment. So when someone signs up to Gumloop, all that runs through Gumloop. And then we have various notifications to be like, hey, this person has gone to this level of threshold. We should talk to them. What we see with orgs is that initially when we start working with them, it's a lot of work. They'll be like, oh, how do we do this? How do we do that? But then over time, they become self-serve and build out their own workflows by identifying experts. So we're definitely going to grow as a company, but we want to stay lean and also just kind of use our tool. We want to be our best customers.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. I want to know how you use your tool because you guys are the ones who understand it the best. Is there like a client, like you looked in their account and they did something that blew your mind?
Look, I do cohorts every 2 weeks and invite anyone. They're free. So if you go to gumloop.com and find cohort, I can share a link with you. It's like every week someone built something and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like I'll give you an example. We had a cohort a couple of weeks ago where someone worked in Broadway production and they wanted to scrape. Apparently Broadway sales are public. So they just wanted to go to a website and they were non-technical and we're able to automate what is essentially someone's job. Someone who like spent 2-3 hours a week that didn't want to copy pasting information. But what really blew me away was like they all got the historical, they used AI to figure out the URL because it was inconsistent from date to date. That was really cool. And then somebody else had built this. It was a construction company that would get a lot of leads, but a lot of them were like dubious and weren't really interesting. So what this person did was when they got a lead, they would look at Google Maps and try to get the image of the front door. And it worked. Like
of Google Street View?
Yes. So what they would do is that they would search Google, then get the Zillow URL, and then based just from Google in the preview, it gave you like the value of the home. So that was one piece of data that they then used. And then they went to the Google.
So you just evaluate their net worth based on their address and the value.
What was interesting, it was like what he was saying was really interesting, was like, I do these steps anyway. He was just like, I want to give an assessment. Here's an image. Here's how much the home we think is worth. Here's where they live. Here's all this enrichment. Can I find their links? And I thought it was really cool because both of these people were not people who like thought they could do this. And that's what I find really, really cool. And this has always been kind of why I'm attracted to these types of tools, is that I always want people who are like, oh, well, what if I don't have to do this anymore? right? Like Webflow, I was so annoyed. I had to look at all these social media posts all the time. So there's really something special in what people can do, both from like a skills perspective, right? Like you can just build things now. I'm having a ton of fun building stuff with Gumloop, and I'm sure
it's also going to be mandatory at this point, right? It's like now we have all these capabilities through these AI models where we can essentially transform data into anything else and process it.
But it's still a skills thing, right? Like I always say this, like I'm very grateful to work with this great team because they've up-leveled me in a sense of like, I say this as a joke all the time. I come in on Monday and then someone from the team is like, we can do that with AI. And I'm like, can you really? And then on Wednesday it's live. And I'm like, wow.
It
like
probably can.
Yeah, so I'm just like everybody else upskilling myself, whether that's Gumloop or otherwise.
So what is one thing that you saw was impossible to do with AI and then they changed your mind and they did it?
MCP Nodes. 100%.
Okay.
I was like, there's no way this will work. And I always joke, right? Like everyone here laughs at me because I'm always the guy who's like, can we really do this? Or even like when I joined, I got set up on Cursor because our page was custom coded and someone was like, oh, just drop the Google.
Coming from Webflow?
Yeah, coming from Webflow. No, but we migrated our blog to Webflow. So I still have roots.
Okay.
But yeah, just drop the Google Doc into Cursor and have it format the page and it worked. And now I'm a much better developer because I work with Cursor and understand what's going on. And we hope that people have that same experience with Gumloop, right? So we have AI help them build their flows. They start getting it. They start working with Gummy. And then they're like, oh, actually, I feel like I can build myself. And, testament to what we see is that so many folks, even salespeople, they know what the process is. They just haven't been able to automate it. And then they start automating it on Gumloop with everything we have available. And then it's like they start building pieces for other people. And it's just really, really cool. So yeah, it's been really
Everyone's
fun.
a builder now.
Everyone is a builder. You can just do things now.
All right, Aaron, thanks for joining the podcast. I hope you had fun as well. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for showing me the new MCP Nodes. I think this is really cool, actually. I'm going to try it on my own. And anywhere you want to send people, I mean, they can sign up for a free account, right? It's probably the best place to go. They should just sign up and try it.
Absolutely.
Because it's free forever for like a certain amount of credits every month.
Yeah,
right?
so folks, sign up, join a cohort. We have Gumloop University. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. We're shipping all the time. So any feedback, let us know. We are heads down building Gumloop. It was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to see what everybody builds.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.